you think, as a Christian, I blasphemed by saying like God became man?
I think as a Muslim who knows about Christianity, I think Christians should believe that you blaspheme. I think if you look at the original church
before Constantine,
and these guys were monotheistic. They never ascribed Christ to be a part of God. They never ascribed him to be divine. They never worshipped Christ, right? So I'm saying, as per the early Christians, you're blaspheming.
Okay, you guys, you heard from his own lips. This Muslim is claiming to really know Christianity and everything of that sort. But let's see if he really does. Now, he claimed that the early Christian church did not accept Jesus as God. Now look here, people. The early Christian church that the Muslims are always referring to are the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century Christians. And when they talk about the manuscripts, they're talking about the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century manuscripts that come from those specific Christians. Now look here. By the time of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, the apostles and their apostles were all dead. They were all executed. And look here, I'll even show you in a quick video on how most of the apostles and their apostles had died.
The apostles. The first apostle to suffer after the martyrdom of Stephen was James, the brother of John. Clement tells us, when this James was brought to the tribunal seat, he that brought him, and was the cause of his trouble, seeing him to be condemned, and that he should suffer death, was in such sort moved within heart and conscience, that, as he went to the execution, he confessed himself also, of his own accord, to be a Christian. And so were they led forth together, wherein the way he desired of James to forgive him for what he had done. After, James had a little paused within himself upon the matter. Turning to him, he said, Peace be to thee, brother, and kissed him, and both were beheaded together. A.D. 36. Thomas preached to Parthians, Medes, Persians, Carameans, Hyrcanians, Bactrians, and Magicans. He was killed in Calamina, India. Simon, brother of Jude and James the younger, who were all sons of Mary Cleophas and Alphaeus, was bishop of Jerusalem after James. He was crucified in Egypt during the reign of the Roman Emperor Trajan. Simon the Apostle, called Canaeus, and Zealots, preached in Mauritania, Africa, and Britain. He was also crucified. Mark, the first bishop of Alexandria, preached the gospel in Egypt. He was burned and buried in a place called Buclonus during Trajan's reign. Bartholomew is said to have preached in India and translated the Gospel of Matthew into their tongue. He was beaten, crucified, and beheaded in Albanopolis, Armenia. Andrew, Peter's brother, preached to the Scythians, Sogdians, and the Saith in Sebastopolis, Ethiopia, in the year 80. He was crucified by Aegeus, the governor of the Edessians, and buried in Petra, in Achaia. Bernard and Saint Cyprian mention the confession and martyrdom of this blessed apostle. Partly from them and partly from other reliable writers we gather the following material. When Andrew, through his diligent preaching, had brought many to the faith of Christ, Aegeus, the governor, asked permission of the Roman Senate to force all Christians to sacrifice to the honor of the Roman idols. Andrew thought he should resist Aegeus, and went to him, telling him that a judge of men should first know and worship his judge in heaven. While worshiping the true God, Andrew said, he should banish all false gods and blind idols from his mind. Furious at Andrew, Aegeus demanded to know if he was the man who had recently overthrown the temple of the gods and persuaded men to become Christians, a quote superstitious sect that had recently been declared illegal by the Romans. Andrew replied that the rulers of Rome didn't understand the truth. The Son of God, who came into this world for man's sake, taught that the Roman gods were devils, enemies of mankind, teaching men to offend God and causing him to turn away from them. By serving the devil, men fall into all kinds of wickedness. Andrew said that after they die, nothing but their evil deeds are remembered. The proconsul ordered Andrew not to preach these things anymore, or he would face a speedy crucifixion. Whereupon Andrew replied, I would not have preached the honor and glory of the cross if I feared the death of the cross. He was condemned to be crucified for teaching a new sect and taking away the religion of the Roman gods. Andrew, going toward the place of the execution and seeing the cross waiting for him, never changed his expression, neither did he fail in his speech. His body fainted not, nor did his reason fail him, as often happens to men about to die. He said, O cross, most welcome and longed for, with a willing mind, joyfully and desirously I come to you, being the scholar of him which did hang on you, because I have always been your lover and yearned to embrace you.
Now, from just showing you that clip on how some of these apostles and their apostles had died and were executed for the faith, this was right after Jesus ascended and they went off and preached the message and everything. Slaughter of the church soon entered. And that's what happened. So when people talk about Christianity was a persecuting power, no, you're talking about way, way later when the Roman Catholic Church popped up, sir. Or ma'am. That's what you're talking about. You're not talking about in the past when you had the true church of God who was getting persecuted and then also saving souls as well. That's what was going on in the Church of Christianity and the Church of Christ in the early part with the apostles and their apostles. But the point I'm getting at, though, is I have this book called Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. Like I said, I study the occult and I study other religions, but I study Freemasonry as well, so that way everyone can get a better understanding of where everything comes from. Now, this book comes from Albert Pike, and it says on page 511, in the early days of Christianity, there was an initiation like those of the pagans. Persons were admitted on special conditions only to arrive at a complete knowledge of the doctrine. They had to pass 3 degrees of instruction. The initiates were consequently divided into 3 classes. The first, auditors; the second, catacombs; and the third, the faithful. The auditors were a sort of novices who were prepared by certain ceremonies and certain instruction to receive the dogma of Christianity. A portion of these dogmas was made known to the catacombs, who after a particular purification, received baptism or the initiation of the theogenesis, divine generation. But in the grand mysteries of that religion, the incarnation, nativity, passion, and resurrection of Christ, none were initiated but the faithful. These doctrines and the celebration of the holy sacraments, particularly the Eucharist, were kept with profound secrecy. These mysteries were divided into 2 parts. The first, styled the Mass of the Catacombs; the second, the Mass of the Faithful. The celebration of the mysteries of Mithras was also styled a Mass. The ceremonies used were the same. There were found all the sacraments of the Catholic Church. So all the sacraments of the Catholic Church were found in this initiation process. So, no, the early church, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century Christians that they weren't really Christians. They were just styled in a way, and they had on that mask and that veil of Christianity, but really they practiced the secret mysteries, as this book is quite telling us. But look here, it gets more revealing though. Even the breath of confirmation. The priest of Mithras promised the initiates deliverance from sin, just like how the Roman Catholic Church does, by means of confession and baptism and a future life of happiness or misery. He celebrated the oblation of bread, image of resurrection. The baptism of newly born children, the Catholic Church practices extreme unction, confession of sins, all belong to the Mithraic rites. Mithraic is sun worship, pure sun worship. So when people talk about the early Christians didn't worship Jesus and stuff, yeah, they didn't, because they didn't believe in his divinity, because they really practiced the pagan mysteries. And occultism doesn't accept Jesus as God and his divinity. They believe the God of the Bible to be evil. So he doesn't know what he's talking about, Christians. These people don't know what they're talking about. They claim to know, but they don't. They don't know nothing. Now look here. It also says this. The candidate was purified by a species of baptism. A mark was impressed upon his forehead, Tammuz. So Mark Wahlberg and the dude who played Passion of Christ, well, not Passion of Christ, but the Chosen Jesus TV show or movie that just came out, both did it. Other people do it. You shouldn't be doing that because it's paganism. But some people already know that though. But let's finish though. It says this. He offered bread and water, pronouncing certain mysterious words. Now look here. It talks about the Basilidians, and it says a sect of Christians that arose soon after the time of the apostles. So they didn't come during the apostles' time, they were after. Now look here, it says, practice the mysteries with the old Egyptian legend. Now I'm not going to keep, actually I'm going to read this part. They symbolized Osiris by the sun, Isis by the moon, and Typhoon by Scorpio. I'm not going to read the rest of that. It also talks about, Irenaeus tells us that the Simonians, one of the earliest sect of the Gnostics, had a priesthood of the mysteries. So dude don't know what he's talking about, people. He don't know what he's talking about. Talking about the 1st century Christians didn't worship them, so us Christians now is blaspheming. No, we're not blaspheming. You are the blasphemer. You are the one that doesn't know what you're talking about. Your religion is the spirit of Antichrist. 2 + 2 would never be 5. So there's truth and error in this life. And as long as that is the case in this reality, Islam is false. And what you're saying is error, sir. Now look here. It also talks about Tertullian tells us that the Valentinians, the most celebrated of all the Gnostic schools, imitated or rather perverted the mysteries of Eliseus. Irenaeus informs us in several curious chapters of the mysteries practiced by the Macrosians, and Origen gives us much information as to the mysteries of the Ophites. Now, by the way, Origen was also a supposed Christian, but he wasn't. He practiced the mysteries. Now, look here. It also says this. And there is no doubt that all the Gnostic sects has mysteries and an initiation. Look, it said this. And there is no doubt that all the Gnostic sects, so these different Christian sects during the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, the supposed Christians, were really pagan schools. And it says this. And no doubt that all the Gnostic sects had mysteries and initiation. They all claimed to possess a secret doctrine coming to them directly from Jesus Christ, different from that of the Gospels and Epistles. So look here, in this Morals and Dogma book, let me read that to you again. It said this. They all claim to possess a secret doctrine coming to them directly from Jesus Christ. So they claimed that they got their information from Jesus Christ, but it also says it was different from that of the Gospels and Epistles. So was it really from Jesus Christ then? Or could it have been from Lucifer? It's up for you to debate on that and choose. I know what it is. I know the truth. So I'm not going to even speculate. If you ask me, it was. Because the Bible says that the devil transformed himself into an angel of light. Transform, shapeshift. Look it up. So look here. It also talks about and superior to those communications which in their eyes were merely exoteric. So there was an esoteric belief that they accepted, which was the pagan mysteries that they really held, and the exoteric was the gospel and the epistles. So like I said, they had that veil on. The veil, or the Bible better puts it, wolves in sheep clothing. Whichever you want to, the veil or wolves in sheep clothing. They was both of them. So when these Muslims go to these 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Christians, or even their manuscripts, I say, get out of here. Listen here. They would not want to debate me because I'm going to go to many sources to debunk this. Listen here. Jesus, Yeshua of Nazareth, is King of kings, Lord of lords, regardless of what anybody says. Now look here. It also says this secret doctrine they did not communicate to everyone, and among the extensive sect of the Basilidians, hardly 1 in 1,000 knew it, as we learn from Irenaeus. We know the name of only the highest class of their initiates. It also talks about Clemens, Bishop of Alexandria, born about AD 191. Then also it talks about Origen. It also talks about Archelaus, if I'm saying his name correctly, and he was bishop of Cascara in Mesopotamia. These people were supposed to be bishops and people of the Church of God, but they really not. Look here, it also had more names. Cyril, Bishop of Jerusalem. Look here, Saint Basil, the great bishop of Caesarea, born in the year 326 and dying in the year 376, says, we receive the dogmas transmitted to us by writing, and those which we have descended to us from the apostles. Beneath the mystery of oral tradition, for several things have been handed to us without writing, lest the vulgar, by the way, they call us vulgar, they call you catacomb, they call you the profane. Those are the people who don't know. But you know it now, so you're not the profane. You're not the vulgar no more. You're not the catacomb, or you're not the goyim. They also use the goyim as well. You're not any of that anymore because you're knowledgeable of what's really going on now. Look here. It also says that the vulgar, too familiar with our dogmas, should lose a due respect for them. Now it also says, it talks about Saint Gregory Nazianzen, Bishop of Constantinople, AD 379, says, you have heard as much of the mystery as we are allowed to speak openly in the ears of all. The rest will be communicated to you in private. I don't even got to read the rest. It also talks about Saint Ambrose, Archbishop of Milan, actually, my bad. Then it also talks about Saint Augustine, Bishop of Hippo. Come on now. It talks about Saint crystal stone. And then it talks about St. Augustine speak of initiation more than 50 times. St. Ambrose writes to those who are initiated. I don't really depend upon their work at all, nor their manuscripts. Now, I'm not going to knock anybody that goes to the NIV, the RSV, and any of that sort, but I should tell you, if you look at the certain verses that are taken out of the NIV and all these other scriptures, you can show how it points to Jesus Christ and many other different things about God, but also the Word of God, which is Jesus Christ. Look here, I don't want to make this video longer than what it already has to be. I just wanted to point out that this dude is talking about the early Christians, but as I've shown you from Morals and Dogma, the early Christians were not true Christians. They were wolves in sheep clothing. And that's all it is to it. So I'm not going to depend upon their work, and you should neither if you are considering yourself a Christian. That's all I got to say about it. And I just set the record straight for you guys. That we're saying that, love you, be safe, get in your word. The signs and times point to Jesus coming. You need to get in your word because Jesus is coming.